I'm Brian Doty. I've been at Dell for about 18 years and 3 months or so. I'll be an 18-year veteran. I've worked on everything from DRAC to OpenManage Essentials to OpenManage Enterprise. Today I'm going to talk about OpenManage Enterprise, which is our newest server management console. I'm a planner, so I'm kind of looking long-term. I have flanked by a whole array of technologists and product managers who work on the portfolio for OpenManage. Today, I want to really focus in on OpenManage Enterprise, why we did it. Anybody here familiar with OpenManage Essentials or have seen it, played around with it? Okay, great, wow, quite a few people. Great product, right? Love it. However, it's built on Windows. It's also uses Silverlight technology. We knew that we had to move away from that. So did a lot of research. In fact, when I say a lot, I mean, talking to probably 1,000 different customers and non-customers, IT professionals, and learned a lot of different things about what it takes to manage in the next era. We thought it was the right time. There was a good inflection point at this point in time to go ahead and invest in a new console. We've named it OpenManage Enterprise, and it's a follow-on to OpenManage Essentials. We just released what we're calling the tech release version in early December, and we've already gotten about probably 4,000 downloads, huge amount of interest, right? Which is a great thing, but it's also really tough when you're a product manager and you're filtering all this feedback. But what did I learn from the research? I'm going to kind of describe this. This is doing it a disservice because we learned so much, but I had to really boil it down. I made this slide, is that in order to be successful in this space, we have to be obsessively simple. I've talked to endless customers who are server generalists, and they say that having a server management console delivered by the server vendor is absolutely critical for me, right? I need to be able to do monitoring, firmware updates, configuration. Kevin talked a lot about this server lifecycle. He showed the wheel. We take that very seriously. OpenManage Enterprise only talks to, I shouldn't say only, but it primarily talks to iDRAC to do server lifecycle management. Now we are kind of a Tower of Babel. We can decode SNMP. We talk Redfish. We also talk IPMI. But primarily we do all these things through the iDRAC to enable any kind of, or reduce the need for any kind of agent inside the operating system at all. We also have end-to-end automation. That's another key deliverable with OpenManage Enterprise. Customers don't want to be bogged down with the mundane tasks, especially if it's a single server. You saw Doug talk about really powerful things we can do with iDRAC. What if you could do that on 1,000 servers? Now you can do it great with automation, but not every customer is savvy enough to use automation in their environment. They want something simple that they can deploy and actually get up and running and have that same advantage. And also policy-driven everything. I have a little slide we're going to talk about that. I think it's really key when it comes to automation. And then unification. How many people have heard of single pane of glass, right? I hear it all the time, right? And customers understand you can't be a perfect single pane of glass covering everything under the sun, as much as I'd like to do that, but they want less panes of glass. They want to do one workflow and not have to bounce from console to console to console to do it, right? So we set out to really achieve these three things. And keep in mind, this is the first version of the console. We have great plans for this that not all of them I can talk about, but I'll expose a little bit about what might be coming in the next release. Here's a screenshot, by the way. So what is the scope of OpenManage Enterprise? I find it's best to start with kind of talking about what do we do, right? Is this a console that does everything? And you're talking about lifecycle management of servers. We do full lifecycle management of Dell servers. That includes tower servers, rack servers, as well as modular servers. So the M1000E, our popular Vertex product as well. But we also do monitoring of storage, networking, compute, and third party. And a lot of this is by the fact that we allow you to load in third-party MIBs. We do support some Redfish. We're just kind of tipping our toe into the Redfish realm. But we allow customers to monitor pretty much everything they want. And I think this is a real big differentiator from us. A lot of server vendors are really good at managing their own stuff, don't really do a lot of, if any, third-party management at all. But we've gone as far as to allow you to load in your own MIB so you can add alert recognition of anything that you want to. I'm going to try to move fairly quickly, so stop me if you think I'm moving too quick. I want to get to a demo so you can actually see the product. I think it's a little bit more fun. I also want to leave 5 minutes at the end to talk a little bit about our OpenManage mobile integration with this product. Whole list of features and capabilities. I'll pick a few of these out. As I mentioned, we're doing agent-free management completely. We did something new with OpenManage Enterprise that Essentials didn't do, is kind of an onboarding process. So we can discover systems automatically. So during ping sweeps, we can find a system, and we actually do an onboarding process that the customer has a lot of control over. And a couple of things that the onboarding process does is cache the password of the system, right? So that way the roles of OpenManage Enterprise are dictating what kind of capabilities are allowed for that particular node. All customers can, of course, opt out of that. The other thing that we do is set up SNMP event notification, right? So in the past, customers would have to actually, discover the system, then they'd have to go to the system and turn on SNMP event notification and point at the console. They don't have to do that anymore. With Dell systems, we can automatically set that up. So customers essentially discover and get up and running. We've had a lot of customers say, wow, I can just deploy this really quickly and get up and running, and I don't have to worry about it. The other thing we heard customers say is that, I'm really tired of deploying consoles and I have to purchase an operating system license. In the case of Essentials, as great of a product as it was, or is, the customers still have to purchase their own operating system license and their database license. This is deployed as a virtual machine, an OVF file, soon an OVA. Bless you. That allows customers to simply deploy it on ESXi, Hyper-V, as well as KVM environments. Kind of a turnkey deployment, if you will. We also have a number of other capabilities that weren't available in Essentials, including customized reporting. So you can actually build your own reports. I'll show a little bit of demo of that if we can get to it. We have a northbound API that is 100% comprehensive when it comes to the features in the GUI. In fact, the UI is built on top of that API. So you have everything you can access through the UI is also available through the API. And I say it's Redfish inspired because there is no real Redfish standard for consoles per se, but we try to be as close to it as we can. So if you're used to coding in REST and using JSON, OData, you'll have the same experience with OpenManage Enterprise. A few things at the bottom here I'll talk about is our scale. These things are coming in a release that comes this summer. Today our current scale is 5,500 servers. We're going to go to 8,000, maybe even 10,000 in the summertime. We're also going to add mobile integration, which my colleague's going to talk about, and stateless management as well. So by the time we reach summertime, we will be parity plus with our current OpenManage Essentials product. So what do I mean by policy-based automation? I mentioned that a little bit earlier. I'm trying to kind of condense a lot of different kind of subjects into one slide, which is the way that OpenManage Enterprise works. In order to enable automation for our customers in a very, very simple way, we enable customers to create policies. And these policies are enforced by OpenManage Enterprise. Now, there's different levels of enforcement, but generally what customers want is a policy-based enforcement for monitoring, so they can actually say what happens when a particular alert of a certain severity or from a certain device comes in. I want to be, receive an SMS text message, I want to be emailed, or I want the console to pop up, something like that. There are even the ability to run scripts on the back end where they can do integration with ServiceNow or something like that, no problem. There's also, customers want policy-based remediation for firmware as well as configuration baselines. Firmware is something where a customer could use something my colleague's going to talk about in the next session, I think, which is Dell Repository Manager. If they want to strictly control what kind of firmware that they want to use for their environment, I want to go N-2 and I only want to update BIOS and DRAC, that's no problem. They can create their own catalog, and OpenManage Enterprise can consume that catalog and enforce it across the environment. In addition, a customer might say, you know what, I don't want to go through that pain. I'm going to trust Dell. I'm going to point at Dell.com, and every so often I'm going to update that library. You can point at Dell.com. OpenManage Enterprise will actually go grab that data and pull it down if it has access to the internet and actually use that as a baseline across the entire environment. Well, what does a baseline do? It's really a compliance report. Every so often, if the system finds out that maybe a certain server is out of date with a particular BIOS that you've set as a baseline, it will tell you, and you can get basically a one-button-click remediation for that baseline. We have a similar story with configuration. I think this is really where we set ourselves apart from the industry. A lot of consoles require you to deploy the server using that console in order to do more operational management later. Right? OpenManage Enterprise is not the same. It doesn't require you to deploy the server using this tool, although it can. It doesn't require you to do that in order to get ongoing operational management. So for example, I could have deployed my server using maybe some scripting or API or a Pixie server, with a config file or something like that, but I can still enforce certain configuration attributes using the compliance reporting in the system. And in our upcoming summer release, we'll allow you a one-button click method of actually remediating those differences, so customers have a very easy way to, say, enforce USB ports being turned off across their environment. And by the way, if you have any questions, definitely stop me, no problem.
Hey, Brian, I had a question.
Yes.
Someone asked on Twitter about OpenManager and HTML5 plugin for vCenter. Do you guys have that, or is there plans for it?
I can't talk about that right now. We are looking long-term when we plan our OpenManage Enterprise portfolio, although we do have an existing integration called OpenManage Integration for VMware vCenter and for VROPS that customers can download and use today. Actually, before we go into action, yes, Kevin?
The question was whether or not we are adding that type of capability and adding HTML5 functionality to it. Yes, probably in the future you will see that coming out.
Thank you, Kevin.
There was a question a little earlier I wanted to address in this presentation, talking about support assist integration. Although we do have support assist integration with our iDRACs for customers who have a few servers and they don't want to go through the trouble of deploying a console, that implementation, as well as the one I'm going to talk about, removed that the SII or the personal information, IP addresses, usernames, and that sort of thing from the data that it sends back to Dell. What's great about OpenManage Enterprise, though, is we integrate with our Support Assist product, which allows customers to basically gather, health information across their environment, and then in the case where there's hardware replacement or something that needs to happen on the Dell side, we'll automatically send that information to Dell so that the Dell folks can actually contact the customer and automate that entire process of debugging the system. That's available in our current product that we released in December. I'm going to shift gears now and actually do a demo. I think that's way more interesting than slides. If I can find my mouse pointer, of course. Something a little bit disconcerting with seeing the screen over here, but I'll do my best here. So what you're seeing right now is the OpenManage Enterprise. That's running HTTPS. I'm going to have to fix this monitor here. Hold on. And duplicate it here.
Yeah.
There we go. I think I've been presenting for a while, so it automatically logged me out. There we go. So one thing we did was we worked with our EDG organization, Enterprise Design Group, and they are their only purpose here at Dell is to make our products look the same as much as possible and also make them extremely easy to use. To this end, we had lots of user panels that we would show OpenManage Enterprise screens and concepts to, and we'd always pick the screen that worked the best. So a lot of the screens that you're going to see, we went through lots of rigorous user testing to make sure they're easy to use as possible. And anytime I always think, well, maybe we're going a little too far with simplicity, I'm corrected really quickly when I hear customers say, listen, I don't have time to learn your product. If I have to get training, you failed, right? And so we took that mentality, and I earlier said obsessive simplicity. I don't use that everywhere, but I kind of mean it. I've become kind of obsessed lately. But right off the bat, this dashboard is designed for monitoring, right?
As long as you don't go all the way to the Microsoft extreme and do your usability testing with people who've never seen the product before, and make it easier and easier for newbies and harder for people who have experience.
That's a good point. Yeah, who you select for that research, absolutely critical, right? So we want to go with IT pros, some of which had used OpenManage Essentials, but maybe more importantly, customers who have used our competitor products, just to kind of get an opinion of like, how do we stack up, right?
Put John on your next focus group.
All right, will do. So we had right off the bat, this console is designed for operational use. So what we show on the homepage is hardware health as well as alerts. So Brian, what are these different things? Well, hardware health is actually telling you, we only unfortunately have 5 devices to work with on the system, but as I mentioned, we can go up to 5,500, 8,000 later. But I can quickly see that I have 1 critical device and 4 that are okay. This is their actual health right now. We also receive alerts. So just because a device is monitored, there may be even more devices that we're listening for alerts from, right? And we can actually categorize those alerts into different categories. So critical, warning, normal, info, maybe unknown. In the case where you don't have a MIB installed, it might just show up unknown.
So for every 5,500 servers, I need a new one of these?
You do for now, but we have some long-term plans to address that.
You're going to federate them all together?
Maybe.
It's a manager of managers.
I tell you, I get a lot of requests for features. It's a great thing, but it's also a tough thing, right? Because as a product manager, I have to prioritize. But that is one that we definitely are looking at very closely. I've had requests for 100,000 servers.
Yes.
So
I can see that.
we're going to get up there, right? So anyway, what's also interesting is that we have recent alerts you can kind of see really quickly. A lot of these alerts actually come from the iDRAC. We have very great and deep integration with the iDRAC, and I'll show you some examples of that. We can see recent tasks that I've run, like health tasks as well as inventory tasks. My goal, though, is to integrate this to such a degree with DRAC that there's no real task execution in the background. It's all totally obscured, so you can do management even easier than you can do today. We also have a few widgets at the bottom. Warranty, one of the most popular features. I want to know when my warranty is out of date. You can see that from this console, as well as firmware and configuration baselines that I've talked about before. Let's go ahead and go into one of those. But before I do, one of the other innovations we pursued was a device grid. There's a couple of aspects to this. On the left-hand side, you'll see a number of different groups, some of which are system groups, are just built in. Show me all my HCI servers, show me my storage devices, et cetera. But you can also create custom groups, or static groups as we call them, where I could drop a server in there and I want to give Paul access to these servers or something like that. But what's kind of clever here is we have this thing called query groups. So let's just say I want to create a query group, assuming I can actually click on the tab there. And I can name it, let's just say I want to make these Dell servers in a IP range. And I can copy a query and just say, let's just pick DRAC servers with a DRAC in them. But I can actually build this query out, pretty clever. So I can use and or operators, XOR, whatever I want. And I can actually say in here, I maybe want to search for IP information, device IP address contains, let's say 10.255, and then I can save it. And so I have a query group show up here. And Dell servers in an IP range are actually showing up here, right? So what's great about this is that if you want to limit a policy to a dynamic range of servers, you can do that, right? So I want all Windows servers that have DRAC, or maybe all storage devices, or there's any number of attributes that we collect from the system via inventory are actually shown in that dropdown.
So could I do all servers that contain virtual machines tagged as PII?
Not yet. But we do discover virtual machines today, but we don't do much with them yet. So in the future, though, I do plan to offer more of a virtual machine to server association with that kind of information.
The tags will become very, very important there.
I think context is so important, right? Flagging a server is more important than another. You might put in a group that's really critical, right? Like a, VM that's with this tag or something like that. That's for criticality, or maybe even, lock it down. We showed a prototype at Dell World last year of using this tool to lock down servers, as we discussed earlier. That's also a feature coming. What's great about this also is that you have this grid and it shows all the servers, and if you have hundreds and hundreds of servers, you can quickly filter this grid using the groups on the left-hand side, or filters that you can enable on this one. You can also check a checkbox on one of these servers and say blink the IP address, or the blinky on the back of here, or you can launch the web GUI of the iDRAC. In fact, let's do that. One of these servers is an unhealthy state, so I can click on it and I can actually go to the device menu, and I can see really quickly what's wrong with this device. And I think what's wrong with this one is it's out of compliance. But nonetheless, we can quickly see the DRAC's remote console. And this is the really cool part. It may not seem like a whole lot because it's just one click, but the engineering that went on behind it is far more. It belies how simple it is. But actually, I can launch the virtual console. And in the past, when you had Java, right, you'd get all the Java prompts and all that kind of stuff, all these certificate issues. But all I had to do was click on that one button, and I'm launching the viewer of iDRAC. This is available with iDRAC 9 and OpenManage Enterprise. It's part of that deep integration I'm talking about. Thank you. But you have to have HTML5 enabled. Now, a lot of customers aren't going to have HTML5 enabled. They're going to have like Java. So the cool thing about this is if I had clicked this button, and the server hasn't booted, obviously, it's another problem, but if I had actually clicked that and HTML5 enable or DRAC console was not enabled, it will tell me, do you want to enable it now? And you can say yes, and it turns it on, and you will never get that prompt again.
But HTML5 was available also on iDRAC 8.
That's correct. However, it took more than just iDRAC, the HTML5 interface to make this work. We had to do some machine trust authentication between the two products. And that's something we're probably going to do more of so that we can actually launch even the web GUI and that kind of stuff without being constantly prompted, right? Let me go on to firmware baselining. I think I'm running a little short on time. It always seems like you can cover so much more than you actually can. So I'll go back to the home page real quick. If you go back to the home page, you'll see at the bottom these widgets, and I talked a little bit about them, but let's just say there's a firmware baseline here. I can click on it, and I can quickly see I only have one baseline in the system. But what's great about this is that I can actually have 1,000 baselines if I want. So I can make one for every server if I wanted. That's probably not too bright, but I mean, if I really wanted to do that to myself. But what's nice is that I could maybe have some production servers, which I have a different standard for, and then maybe some non-production, which is my standard is a lot older. I don't really need to update them very often, and that's all possible. But I can click on my baseline here. This is the baseline I created before we started the demo today. And I can quickly see that I have 3 compute that are part of this baseline that are out of compliance. And all I have to do is kind of open this up after running the report to see what's out of compliance. It's very simple, current version and baseline version. You can see right here the Broadcom NIC is out of date. Here, the iDRAC as well. iDRAC with license controllers run 3.0, and I need to be at 3.15. So, and all I'd have to do here is click Update Firmware on this device, and I get a menu. I could either schedule the update, or I could run it right now. And if it's a iDRAC update, the great thing is it doesn't require reboot of the system, so it's pretty much agnostic of what's going on with the OS. Not pretty much, it is agnostic. Or I can stage these for the next reboot, right? So I say, you know what? I have another guy who manages the reboots. I'm just the hardware maintenance guy, and I can click Stage it, and then all he has to do is reboot the system. The firmware will already be running and saved on flash space in the system, ready for the application process, thus minimizing downtime. Or, of course, if I want to, I can actually schedule later and set a reboot time within OpenManage Enterprise. So I might know that, hey, this Friday at midnight is my downtime window. I've already notified my users. I can actually do it right there. So it's a very similar story when we get into compliance for configuration.
Well, hold on, so you said compliance report. First off, compliance just to a baseline, right?
Just to a baseline.
Okay. Once if I wanted to look up, when you say compliance, I start thinking about totally different things than what you guys are probably thinking about.
Yes, you do.
Maybe you should.
I probably should stop, yes. But with Spectre and Meltdown being big issues right now, most people just want to know which machines in their list have vulnerabilities
Yes.
to those, especially hardware ones. Is there a way just to query for, like, give me the list of all the machines that have Spectre vulnerabilities?
You can do that. Now, I can't just say in the search, Elasticsearch at the top of this, I can't just say Spectre or Meltdown and show me which BIOS fixes this. But if you know which BIOS fixes it on the Dell side, you can use Repository Manager to create a bucket.
The idea, that's the problem. Most of the people won't know. So being able to have it read the README and pull out that information or some sort of tag information would be very valuable for those people to make it simpler. They know Spectre and Meltdown. They don't know BIOS I3, 4, 5, 6.
I already have a requirement for that, actually. Can't tell you when we'll have that, but that's what I want. I want to get to a point where you have context right in front of you.
Thank you.
This BIOS fixes these issues, right? I'll be honest, it'll take a little while to get there. So,
As Brian said, there's no shortage of ideas.
yeah.
Capacity from an engineering perspective.
Yeah.
But again, great ideas, great thinking the way you guys are going down that path. Similar requests we get from customers, so good for validating what we're hearing.
Yeah, great. So configuration, very similar. I won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but it is kind of slick how you can do this sort of thing. But I can quickly review a report and show that this DRAC is out of compliance. And then I can drive down into this device as well and see exactly what's out of compliance. In this case, I'm looking at all the DRAC settings, and there's quite a few here. It is a little bit a daunting list. But I can see really quickly, like maybe I set up an SNMP alert destination to another console, maybe ServiceNow or SolarWinds or something like that, and it's out of compliance. Like it's not pointing at the right system, right? And that's where I can monitor this and then enforce it, right? Now we don't do automatic enforcement yet. A lot of customers like the term automated, not necessarily automatic, especially when there could potentially be a reboot involved. Now, the good news for this particular issue is that I can actually make this change without any reboot on the Dell server at all. But in the case of BIOS changes, maybe updating the BIOS for Spectre or something, or changing a setting, those do require reboots, which have to be scheduled. We have to be very, very careful. Of course, this console is supposed to, increase or lower TCO, not increase it, right? But what's interesting about this is that I mentioned this before, and I don't think I paid enough homage to iDRAC. iDRAC has enabled us. Like I remember when I first started at Dell, DRAC was just a remote access controller. That's it, right? Somewhere around the iDRAC or the 11G timeframe with iDRAC 6, we invented something called the lifecycle controller, where we offered a whole new array, like what we call lifecycle management, beyond just monitoring and remote access, but doing firmware updates, doing configuration, and we really set the standard for the industry. In many ways, inspired some of the capabilities that we see in Redfish today. So we use that capability. So our agent, if you will, is iDRAC, right? The great thing about it, though, is not running inside the operating system, so it's not really an agent. Well, DRAC has a configuration file we talked about with that USB key called the SCP server configuration profile, I think. Anyway, SCP JSON, it has thousands of settings in it. right? So we expose every possible setting that you can get through to storage, BIOS, DRAC, everything, right? And what you can do is actually grab that information, clone it, and deploy it to lots of different servers using our template-based deployment. Or you can say, you know what, I only care about these 3 settings out of those 3,500 settings, and I can enforce them across my environment. So I kind of showed you that before, but it's as easy as going into the template management function here and selecting one of the templates. In this case, I only have one, and I can edit it. And I can actually choose BIOS settings here. System profile settings, serial communication. Maybe I want serial ports set up a certain way. Boot settings. What's really amazing about this is just how broad the capability is, right? When we were planning this feature, I thought, well, what 100 things would we want to put in here? Because, gee, having 3,500 is a lot, right? What we realized is that you can't just choose the same 100 for any customer, right? Everybody has different needs, right? So we tried to make this really easy to use, so you can easily find out which settings you want to enforce in your environment, and then you can enforce them.
So in this compliance, do you also check checksums and firmware checksums and other things related to the hardware, and then tell me if it matches? I'm thinking
For
supply chain.
passwords, yes. So
No,
you can
not
enforce
passwords. I'm thinking about
firmware loadout.
loadout
Yeah.
for supply chain verification.
I see. No, not yet. It's not like a broken record, but we have been looking at that, right? So the idea of actually looking at the firmware checksum to determine if it's a valid firmware is something that this console could do and should do in the future. Completely agree. Good point. We also have an alert log, so you can actually see the alerts that are getting sent to OpenManage Enterprise. There's several alerts. This is the test system, so we have lots of systems in here. A normal customer would not have this many. But we can actually see, compliancy. We can see alerts generated internally by the console that something has gone wrong, or alerts received from third-party devices. We put everything in one place, right? Customers can also acknowledge these events and then dig into them and see. For systems or events that come from the DRAC and the console, we actually have a message ID that you can search online if you want to find out more about that message.
Hey, Brian?
Yes.
Was your question more along the lines, are we checking the firmware versions to make sure they're valid firmware versions?
A little bit of that and a little bit of how
Because,
can I
again,
visualize
what he's
that?
using his iDRAC, right? And iDRAC is doing that checking to make sure that there is actually a signed firmware,
Okay.
that driver and firmware is actually signed, stored by the iDRAC, which has that sign, the
That's right.
signage, right?
Kevin is
So
right.
if he goes and pushes an update that isn't a valid update because it's not signed or whatever, iDRAC's just it's gonna tell you if it
Well, I'm
failed.
also thinking about the 10 gig card that's sitting in there. I'm also thinking about TXT, TPM.
So
And the whole
All of
gamut
it-
of the whole server about its supply chain, its firmware, its signing.
So for anything that is OEM'd by Dell, Intel, Broadcom, QLogic, Emulex, Mellanox, those all have required signed firmware that they provide to us, right? That get loaded in, and iDRAC will be
So
looking.
currently you just check the signature.
We check it through the key, right, that we utilize, the signature, yes, for those things.
Okay. Because what I'm thinking about is somebody, this has happened in a number of different software shops where bad stuff got digitally signed with the proper key, yet it had a different checksum than what should have been there, even though it was properly signed. This has
Okay.
happened in many times.
And I'd have to look into the iDRAC side to see whether or not they're, but I thought that they were doing the checksum and the signature.
And it also depends on which checksum you're using. We can talk about it offline.
I think there's multiple layers of security that we can also add. So not just stopping at one layer. So
Will it report such problems in that list of report compliance?
if we added that feature, it would go up and it would always show in that same alert menu. So you'd always see it as alert coming in. In fact, with Dell systems, we also go to another degree. We do something called polling of the system as well as receiving alerts. So if a system went down, right, and you don't receive alerts, it could look healthy to a console that just monitors SNMP traps. But we also go as far as like pinging the system. Are you okay? Are you okay? And it depends on how big the environment is. If you have 10,000 servers, it's not going to ping as quickly as it would if you have like 5 or 10, right? Until we maybe get into federated approach, right? This is a list of pre-canned reports that we have in this tool. There's no end to the number of requests we get for pre-canned reports, but we added a new feature that's not an Essentials called custom reporting. Exciting name. But I can actually just say a test report here, And I can actually decide what columns, so what things to filter on, what devices I want. So I can filter on the devices or the group of devices, maybe that one that I created before. If it's still here. Yeah, here we go. Dell servers in an IP range. I can filter it further if I want, and then I can select fields. So maybe I just want to see all these alerts that we were just talking about, and I can see alert message and alert ID, and I can actually move these things around. And what's nice is that once I finish and save the report, I can run it and export it as a PDF or XLS or whatever format I want to export it as, right? So unfortunately, I couldn't show you all the features in this console. I'll leave you with one other little thing that we do here is with the search everything field. We took an open source Elasticsearch engine, we put it inside of OpenManage Enterprise, which allows us to literally search everything inside the console. So a customer wants to search for like firmware, they can find the firmware update mechanism. If they want to search for a service tag of a server, it'll show them all the times the service tag shows up in the alert menu as well as in the inventory, so stuff like that. My goal is here is that, I mentioned at the very beginning, if the training is required, I feel like we failed, right? And so we wanted to put everything at the fingertips of the customer. So since I have about 5 minutes left, I thought you guys can ask me some
You've got
questions.
5 minutes left. I have an open-ended question.
Okay, I love those.
And since if I have to go to training, it's a bad thing, on the long-term roadmap, I would love to see I perform an action through the GUI and you output the API code.
That would be great.
That's
Yes.
cool. So I'll give you an open-ended answer.
Because
I'll look at that.
Because I never want to have to look up what the command is in the reference.
Yeah.
But I am going to have to do it 400 times, and you give me the rough first code, I'll edit that.
That's a good point. I'll take that. And there may be a way to actually do it, like just by monitoring the GUI. I'll have to look into this because you might be able to use a tool to monitor the
Yeah, but
API
if
setting up
the
back
GUI is running through the API,
Yes.
That makes it should be
then,
easy. It should be
then you just have to grab it somewhere in the middle and put a export to file button.
It's funny you bring this up because I had a customer request that already, and I was surprised at how many customers, as much as I was espousing simplicity of the UI, I had even more customers saying, tell me more about this API and what it can do. I thought, well, wait a minute, you have an API out to the DRAC. Why do you, I definitely understand the need for an API here, but why are you using it? And I was thinking of the shop, it's like they're all API, they don't use GUIs or anything. They said, I need a consolidator. I want to be able to send a command to this system and have it distribute to 1,000 systems and then report back to me. I don't want to have to distribute to
Yeah,
1,000.
I want to say apply. You've got server groups,
That's
and
right.
I don't want to have to know what the server group is in my script because you'll change it tomorrow and
Yes.
the script won't change. And I want to say apply this change to all of those servers.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I think this may take a different turn for us in the future, where maybe it is more of an API aggregator, less about UI. I don't know.
Yeah, but
But,
You kind of need both because the first time you do it, you're going to go through the UI.
Yep.
That's the whole thing. It's like the first time you want to learn how to do something, it's like, okay, what are the settings? Oh, there, I can do that. And then once I have the API, it's like, oh, it's that language I need to use, or it's that call. And then I can look up the call and say, oh, it has these 17 other elements that I need to figure out how
Right.
to use.
but I
it
could
gives
never
me
look it
the-
up because I don't know what you call it, and the manual's in alphabetical order.
That's right.
Well, there is, so not to bring up manuals, but on Dell Tech Center, we have a pretty full-fledged OpenManage Enterprise site there, and there's an API guide.
Having to go to the web is just as bad as having to go to training.
Yeah.
Assume
I'll
you
consider
can't.
this for the future.
Well, and,
What's that?
I'll consider the idea of having the snippet API for
Yeah,
future release,
it's,
maybe.
I've worked
well,
with.
consider places where you can't go to the internet.
That's true. Dark data centers, stuff like that.
There's a number of those, or you're in such a state that everything's failed and you have 1,000 servers to update.
Yep.
You want to do it fast.
Yeah, hurricanes that hit New York, we had that challenge.
Yeah, there's
Or
good
someone backhoed the fiber.
Yeah.
there's good examples out there in the industry, I think. So of
Yeah, of this.
what
of this
you
idea.
click is what you get in terms of the API code.
Yep.
Driving uniform, like Paul talked about earlier, driving uniformity down through Redfish is a good thing. It becomes more ubiquitous, but there's definitely room for maybe open orchestration is what you'd call it. Some way to kind of break open the workflow and understand what it is.
So let me show one last thing real quick, and then I'll and again, if you have more questions, just stop us. But my colleague Manoj wanted to show our API integration. I apologize, it's actually showing the screen share mode. That's all right. But essentially, we do in our summer release, we'll have an integration with OpenManage Mobile from OpenManage Enterprise. The idea is that you can actually, we use OpenManage, we have OpenManage Cloud Services that utilize the vendor push notification services. So you can actually right on your phone get a buzz Like maybe you're at the dinner on Valentine's Day and your wife is mad at you because you're checking your phone and seeing how the server has failed, but you can do so. And actually, I think we're going to see a little demo of this. Yeah.
Just don't message Howard during Broadway shows. we know to stay away from that.
Hey, the guy behind me
Right,
paid $300 for that ticket. When my pager goes off, he's pissed.
That tells us how long ago it last happened.
That's right.
Yeah, I haven't been on call in a long time. Part of the whole.
One, you
part-
said when your pager goes off. So that,
That was the last time I was on call.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we use the trope. It's like I'm at the baseball game with my son and I get the message. But now I think we got to use the Broadway show now. So we'll use an example.
At the
Brian,
Broadway
question
show
for
with
you.
my.
Yes.
Are there plans to do deeper integrations with VUM, VMware Update Manager?
I can't really talk to that. My colleague is the guy who does the VMware integration, and he's not here today. I don't know if Kevin can speak to that. The question is, are we going to do deeper integrations with VMware VUM?
We will try to, right? And again, I think VMware and Dell are working together to look at how we would do that. They've kind of had a closed architecture at this point around VUM and getting things integrated, but we are,
Although they've been moving into, they'll
They are in-
now update the RAID firmware, so they're moving into it.
yes, they are moving into there, and there's some discussions as to how do they leverage a lot of the out-of-band stuff that we're doing. So there's a lot of similarities to what they want to get accomplished and what we're doing. So
Yeah.
again, it helps that, we're able to have those conversations a lot more frequently now.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
Sure.
So Brian mentioned that the OpenManage mobile integration with OpenManage Enterprise is coming soon, but we do have integration with OpenManage Essentials today, and that's what I'm going to show you in a moment. One advantage when I go through OME, Essentials or Enterprise, as opposed to iDRAC is, when I'm going to console, I can get notifications straight from OME on my mobile device. So the way it works is, when I connect to an OME for the first time, it'll ask me, do you want notifications? And if I say yes, then it'll ask me what kind of policy do I want, which policies are already created on OM Essentials backend. And I might decide to choose, give me all the critical alerts in the weekend. That's like one example of a policy. So anytime there is a critical alert during the time period that I've defined, I'll get an alert. All the alert says is there is an issue with the server. It's not going to send me the IP address or any other detail. Once I get the alert, then I can log in to my OME and go there and look at the alerts. So I am in the demo mode right now. Demo mode is really an offline database which is for learning and training purposes only, which is residing within OMM. So if you see at the bottom, I'm connected to two OpenManage Essentials. I'll go to the first one. And so the first screen that you see is very similar to how you see on OpenManage Enterprise. How many devices do I have and how many alerts do I have? So I could potentially go to the alerts. It's going to show me all the alerts. And then I can decide to either delete an alert if I don't need that, or acknowledge it, or I can share it through email or text with anyone.
Can you set up a default view there? Because I would imagine if you're using the mobile device, it's because you've got something critical,
Yeah.
and you don't necessarily care about the iDRAC generated a test.
Yes, okay.
I know that you can do the drop down there, but I would prefer to see, like when I first get into it, those critical messages being up at top.
It might be that way, isn't it?
Right. So I mean, I think once you select critical, then next time it's going to show you that default.
Okay.
Yep. So in this case, it's all critical alerts. I mean, these are all mostly dummy messages, but these are the critical alerts only that I see. And then I can share it with anyone. I can acknowledge or I can delete. Similarly, I can, if I decide, I can straight go to devices, and it's going to show me all the groups. And in this case, I have 10 servers, and I can go to all this, any server that I want. And within the server, I can either get a snapshot of everything, similar to how I saw on iDRAC, or there is one more feature here, which is the power options. Even when I go through console, I can reboot a server if I want to. So the concept is very similar. One-on-one, I go to iDRAC, or I can go to console, which is one-to-many. And then either I go there and I look at all the alerts. I can choose what alerts I want to see, or I can go to devices. But the notification part is the one that is unique about OMM going through a console, such as Essentials or Enterprise.
I have those alerts come through as a push notification on my phone.
Uh-huh.
That sounds like it could be either really annoying
Right.
or,
So-
I mean, if I can know that the server went down before anybody else knows because the second it happened, my phone told me, that's pretty cool.
You can, on the OpenManage Enterprise and Essentials side, you can limit it, right? So if you only care about these top 10 servers, but you don't want to get every possible event that comes from everybody, you can just
Sure.
say, these are the ones that go to OMM. So
A lot of
that's cool.
flexibility.
There's alert filtering built into OpenManage Enterprise and Essentials to do that.
Which again, one of the things that I'm not sure Manoj mentioned, right? So if you think about this as being a push notification, there are other people out there that have kind of a pull methodology. Now, if you think about being at the theater or whatever and having to go out and you've got 10,000 servers in your data center and have to go query 10,000 servers, think about the battery drain you just did on your phone, right? And again, it's going to be very annoying, time consuming, getting all that information.
Sorry to go back to, but OpenManage Enterprise should be my aggregator, and I pulled.
And that's exactly what this is, right? What he's describing. And again, this is a push and let it filter, let it do what it wants for that type of environment, right? But again, it's like me, I like to go and look at sports and I get updates, sometimes every 30 seconds I'm hitting for an update. Well, my battery just drains like crazy every time I'm doing that. So this is a much more what I would call a better model, a better methodology for being able to get those alerts.
So a suggestion from Twitter came is that in the alert that I get, put either the server name or something that identifies that so I know if I have to do it, anything about it. Could be a development machine, don't care. Or in some environments, I need to tokenize that or use an externalized name like Raspberry instead of like the real machine name. Allow me to have that in there too.
I think we didn't do that because of security.
Yeah,
right?
we
Yeah.
do it, but
Well, if you do a tokenization, then you can call it Raspberry.
I like
whatever.
I like the tokenized better than stripping it all down and even
Right.
better than providing the server name for all the
Yeah.
reasons we
Yeah.
talked about. Yeah,
That's
Good point,
interesting.
but we started with a baseline kind of generic strip
Yeah.
down, right?
Yep.
But for people that want it, you need to allow them to turn it
Right,
on.
and we're looking at that option, like, if you just want, there's a server issue, you get that. But if you want more details, you should be able to get that. Tokenization is a good concept. That way we can hide the IP and use something.
Like
that
you
we-
could actually say these machines are all fruit. Like when I do my categorization, you say, okay, these are fruit, these are bananas, these are
Yeah.
vegetables and whatever. And they
Yeah.
just randomly pick one, but at least they'll know, oh, that's a fruit, that's a vegetable, that's a whatever.
Right.
It's like, is that my area? That's not, I don't care about it.
Yeah.
The fruits,
a good idea.
the fruits are all dev, I don't care.
Well, along those same lines, what are the filtering capabilities so that I don't even get notified on the fruits? Do you continue with your terms? Because I don't care about them, so I don't want to get notified on them. What's the filtering
That
capabilities?
we have that with the aggregator. So as long as you're integrating with the aggregator here, you can say OpenManage Enterprise, if an alert comes from this group, ignore it. If it comes from this group, like these 10 servers, send it to OMM.
And then beyond that, along the same filtering question line, are we just saying if it's a critical notification we're sending it, or can I get even more granular to say if it's this type of critical notification?
You can get really granular.
Okay.
Like even if you upload a MID, for example, it might even be a Dell server, and you could say, I want to receive it if this one alert type is received. Then you go do this, right? You can make hundreds of policies if you want to. So you can get really in the weeds, or you can do critical or warning or whatever.
So
I think that's the key. I mean, you can define any policy that you want, and then you can attach that policy to your OpenManage mobile.
I mean, let's think about all the other products Dell EMC has, specifically around how OpenManage could integrate with them. For example, you notice a potential failure. Time to do a backup. So I go off to the backup tools and say, go do a backup of the server. That would be a cool thing to do. So how does OpenManage fit into the rest of the portfolio of Dell tools and products?
Well, that's a long answer, right? We integrate very well with our own OpenManage products, and we're doing a lot more and more with the Dell EMC portfolio more broadly, right? As far as integration, we do some integration with Link and Launch on the VX rack appliances, I think, Kevin. And so you can actually monitor them. And like, for example, with VX Rail has its own manager, VX Rack have their own manager. We want to detect those environments and not stomp on them. So that firmware and config feature I told you about, I don't want to go touch their config. They're configured a certain way for a specific purpose. So, some of it might not be what we're going to do with those, but what we don't do with those, right? So over time, we're going to do more and more integrations with those products. Nothing that I know of right now around backups.
You also have security tools. It'd be nice to actually integrate with them if a policy is violated anywhere. OpenManage should either respond to it or provide me an alert that says I need to do something, a workflow.
Yeah.
If you make OpenManage that aggregator control point, now I have a place where it's like, okay, I got data coming from the bottom that says I have a problem.
Right.
Or let's say I have 6 disks suddenly starting to show up as in a failure mode or not quite failed, which happens. Right. I get alerts all the time that says, this disk hasn't quite failed yet, but it will like in the next whatever hours. Right. But if you had that, it would be nice to say, okay, I'm getting too many disk failures, do a backup, let's take that and put it into maintenance mode, evacuate everything, or if I have to, it's like integration with VMware products, integration with everything else. Now I have a proactive, self-healing, self-correcting, data-saving set of products.
Yeah, agreed. And I think we're kind of becoming the Tower of Babel, and we're going to have to be, but where we can decode anything coming in. So not everything supports SNMP. That might be another protocol, maybe it's Redfish. But over time, we're adding more and more devices. So that way, you don't have to load in a MIB or some other module. You can simply, it just decodes it automatically from the console.
Yeah.
I think even back to the comment that Brian was trying to make, he mentioned XC, the VX Rail, we auto-discover those. So in that discovery mechanism, we are taking on the approach of looking at, as I said before, these are infrastructure nodes, they're not compute nodes. So when you think about that software-defined data center, we see there's a bunch of servers out there, but they're no longer doing servers. So vSAN environments, storage direct from Microsoft, those are all things that we are looking at, making sure that as we move forward, how do we comprehend those? And again, putting that system in lockdown mode like we talked about, great example as to why we started implementing these things as we start working through our full software-defined data center.